Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Today we're checking out an intelligent audio interface from Audient. Let's get started. Today we're looking at the Audient Evo 16, the latest in their Evo family of audio interfaces. And this is a very interesting audio interface because not only does it provide a ton of connectivity, it's also smart enough to figure out how to set the gains for your recording for you as well. So what we have here is a 24 in and 24 out audio interface. Now those 24 inputs are 8 mic, line, or 2 instrument level inputs, and then 16 digital inputs, and those are over 8 at optical format. We also have 24 outputs, that's 8 analog outputs, as well as 16 digital outputs. 2 of the analog outputs are typically dedicated to monitor out, stereo left and right. You can also assign a second set of those analog outputs to an alternate speaker output, and we have 2 independent headphone outputs as well. Now a nice thing here is that all of this is freely routable just about anywhere you want anything to go, and you do that using the included Evo app. We'll be taking a close look at that a little bit later. But you could route any of the inputs to any of the outputs. You can create independent cue mixes that can be sent to the headphone outs or to the analog outs or the digital outs for that matter. And you can also bring tracks back from your DAW. You can loop back, so if you're podcasting, you're streaming, you're creating content, you can loop back into your computer and record things simultaneously. It's a very versatile audio interface that provides us with a ton of capabilities. Let's take a closer look. Pretty much everything we need to do can be set up and controlled from the front panel using what Audient calls their Motion UI or Motion User Interface system. And that all centers around this main control panel and the full color display. On the back panel, we have 6 of our analog inputs, mic or line level, our 8 analog outputs, as well as the 2 banks of 8 at optical outputs. We also have our USB connection. The interface is compatible with either Mac or Windows PC. On the front panel, we have inputs 1 and 2. Those can accept mic, line, or by hitting this switch, instrument level signals. So if we're on input 1, we select using the button, we can tell it that we want to use the instrument input on the front panel. If we turn that off, those front panel jacks accept mic or line level signals. And we select which input we're working on by hitting these front panel buttons, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Let's go back to 1. You'll see that the display, when we select one of those inputs, you'll see the display changes here to show the status. We can see the gain, we can see which input we're working on, we can see the name for that input, and we can name that in the Audient app. All right. We can also engage phantom power for that input. When we do, the icon changes, and we can engage instrument as well. When phantom's on, you can't use the instrument input, so we'll turn that back off, and now we can change to the instrument input. A really cool feature here is what Audient calls their Smartgain system, and that allows the Evo 16 to listen to incoming mic or line level signals, or instrument level signals for that matter, and to automatically set the gain to the optimal level. You don't have to know anything about signal flow, about optimizing levels, or anything like that. You basically just tell it to listen to the microphone, your line level signal, or your instrument, and it'll do it all for you. Let's take a look at how that works. So I've got this SE Electronics Dynacaster plugged into input 3 on the back panel of the Evo 16. So if I select that input, we need to turn on phantom power. Now if I turn the gain up a little bit, we can see that we've got signal coming in on that input channel. Now if you're setting things up manually, you'd simply turn the knob to set the gain where you want it. But with the Evo 16, we can have it automatically set our gain, and this makes gain staging so much easier. So we just hit the Smartgain button, select our channel, in this case number 3, hit Smartgain again, and get our signal going. We need to feed signal into the Evo 16 for the entire time it's listening to that signal, and it's setting the gain accordingly. It's a very simple process. The interface is just listening to the signal that's coming into its input. It makes the decision as to where the gain should be set. In this case, plus 18 dB will do the job for us. When we go back, we can see we've got a nice healthy level here. And actually, if we look in the app that's running here in my MacBook Pro, we can see that the level is set appropriately as well. As far as the inputs go, we have more features as well. We can stereo link 2 channels together. To do that from the front panel, we hold 2 select buttons simultaneously. They'll both light up, showing that they're linked in stereo. And actually, the Smartgain system still works even if we're linking 2 channels together, or we can do Smartgain on all 8 channels at once. That makes the Evo 16 particularly interesting for drummers, because you can set it up to smart listen on all 8 inputs, play your drums, it'll set gain, and you're ready to record. To go back to mono channels, just press and hold the input pair again, and you'll switch back to 1 input at a time. Each preamp has 58 dB of gain available and a dynamic range of 121 dB. You'll get a nice, transparent, clean signal out of those preamps no matter what type of source you're miking. We can also mute the input channels by pressing and holding a button. You see the mute comes on here. We unmute by pressing and holding again. And we have extremely low noise from these preamps as well, minus 127.5 dB. This makes them appropriate for even delicate acoustic sources. I mentioned there are instrument level inputs on channels 1 and 2 of the interface, and those can accept electric guitar, bass guitar. They're JFET inputs. They're going to feel very natural. And using the mixing capabilities in the Evo 16, we get latency-free performance whenever we're tracking or overdubbing. When we move over to the outputs, we have the monitor control, set our level here. We have headphone control, master volume control for each of our headphone outputs by selecting those. And as with the inputs, if we press and hold, we'll mute that particular output. You can see it flashing. If we press and hold again, it will unmute. We have one other button here, and that's the function button, and that can be assigned to a variety of things. In this case, I've got it assigned to mono my monitor outputs, but we could assign it to dim the monitor outputs, to engage the talkback, and so on. A lot of the settings can be accessed by pressing and holding the main knob, and we can scroll through the choices there. We have power settings here. You can turn power on and off. We can adjust the brightness of the screen. This is also where we can set up the function of that function button. We can assign it to dim, the alternate speaker pair, to talkback, to mono the main outs, and so on. Click OK when we're done. We can also access the status of the audio interface. For example, we can see the sample rate here. We can see how our digital outputs are configured. They can be either 8-channel ADAT or 2-channel SPDIF, and so on. And our last option here is factory reset, which restores us to the default settings for the Evo 16. Now when we're selecting inputs, we can see input levels on the meters. In this case, we've got an output selected, so we're seeing output levels. So you can do everything you need pretty much right here from the front panel. But things are even easier to access using the free app that comes with the Evo 16. So I've got that installed here on my MacBook Pro. And you can see that what we basically have here is a mixer. Now the nice thing is that we can see all our channels. So I've got my 8 microphone level inputs, my preamp inputs. We've got our 16 digital inputs. And then down here on the end, we have our DAW returns. Now we can choose to name all these. So if we double click, we can assign whatever name we want to each channel, each input. We also have 5 output mixes. So right now we're on the master output mix. So we can see that I've got my channel 3 turned up here. If we go to QA, which is a second mix, we can set up a completely separate mix configuration, different panning, and so on. Go back to our master mix. We've got one mix here, QA, which we might, for example, route to our headphones. It can be a different mix. QB can be a different mix again. And you can very quickly switch among those, as well as control their master volume right here. So we've got 4 of those Q mixes that can be assigned to any of the outputs, the headphone outs, the digital outs, or the analog outs. We can also choose what we want to see inside this software mixer. So we can look at just the microphone inputs. We could choose to just look at the optical or digital inputs. Combination of the two. We could choose to just look at our DAW inputs or our DAW and mic inputs, whatever banks of inputs we want, we can choose to look at those. We can also, under View, choose what we're going to be looking at. We can turn off the mic preamp controls, or we can access those, and those include 48-volt phantom power on channels 1 and 2, the instrument level input, gain. We have phase invert or polarity invert for each channel, panning. We can stereo link 2 channels together. We've got mute and solo, and so on. On the far right bottom, we have our master controls here. So we've got mono for our monitor outs. We've got dim for our monitor outs. We've got cut or mute for our monitor outs. And this is also where we engage talkback. Now you can assign talkback using the settings. So if we open that up, we can see our routing possibilities. In this case, we've got everything routed to the main mix, but we could choose to route, say, alternate speakers out of output 3 and 4. And we could assign QA to the first headphone output and QB to the second headphone output. So now I've got 4 separate mixes going to 4 separate destinations here. We can do the same thing with our digital connections. And this is where we set up our talkback. We can choose our source, any of the inputs on the interface, or we can use an external source, such as the microphone that's built into the MacBook Pro. We have a few settings over here. Our digital inputs can be selected either ADAT or SPDIF. Same for our outputs. We can set our clock source. We can choose when we mono the monitor outs if we want to hear just the left, just the right, or the center. And we also have trim settings for our outputs. So we can trim our second set of speakers so that it matches the volume of our main set of speakers. And we can also set our dim level here. So we have comprehensive control over all the features of the Evo 16 inside this app. Very easy to see, very easy to use, and you can even save those as configurations. So if you have multiple setups for different gigs, different recording sessions, you can save those and instantly recall them. But another important feature is you can actually use the Evo 16 in standalone mode where it doesn't need to be connected to a computer. So we could use this as a standalone mixer on a gig, for example. You can set that up either using the front panel or using the app that we have here. And when you do that, you can save this as a standalone setup. A couple of other things to touch on. The Evo 16 is in a very attractive but also very sturdy feeling form factor. Works great on a desktop like this, but you can also order free optional rack gears so you could mount this into a standard 19-inch rack. And the Evo 16 comes bundled with a suite of professional audio software. There's a version of Cubase that comes with this and so on. So you're ready to go right out of the box. Just connect it to your computer by USB and you'll be making music. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Evo 16 audio interface from Audient. It's a really capable audio interface that sounds fantastic and it's super easy to use. That Smartgain function is so cool. It makes it so easy to get into action when inspiration strikes and you want to get right to making music. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Click here for more videos like this, or start at sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.